rhombus will have, opposed to just a parallelogram, deal with the sides and the diagonals. What's the thing about the sides? They're all congruent. So the diagonals, there are two things that are extra. So for your sides, they're all congruent. When it comes to the diagonals do two different things. Do y'all remember what it is without looking at your notes? Okay, they bisect the angle that they are going through. That's a parallelogram property. What's a special one for a rhombus?
Perpendicular.
They're perpendicular. They're not congruent. Anytime you have a figure that has a slant like this, it's impossible for those diagonals to be congruent because this one's always longer. But the two things, the diagonals are perpendicular and the diagonals bisect the angles that they're going through. Keeping in mind diagonals being perpendicular is also a trait of a kite. So if you were only trying to prove, or if you were trying to prove something is specifically a rhombus, you can't just use perpendicular diagonals and say that that's all you need, because that option of a kite is still there as well. Okay, so then with a square is a combination of a rectangle and a rhombus. So how to differentiate that that you have a square instead of a rhombus, prove that the right angles, you have your right angles. Or you could say your diagonals are congruent, because a rectangle diagonals are congruent. So if you can show that all the sides are congruent and the diagonals are congruent, yay, that's a square. Or if you just prove that you have the right angles, just different things like that. So we're going to go through, and just like we did with rectangles, we're going to look at, and parallelograms, we're going to look at like coordinates. What are some options when you have a answer graphs to prove that you have your different parts? Before we get there, we're going to start with classifying that quadrilateral and then solving for x and y. Looking at the markings, what is the most specific way we could classify that quadrilateral? A rhombus. Yes. The reason it can't be known as a square, that 188 down, or 108 down there. So since it is a rhombus, solving for x and y, what's your setup to solve? Huh? Sure. X is 5. What was your setup to get to that? Yeah. 4x plus 17 equals your 8x minus 3. So 4x is equal to 20, so x is 5. Oh, I forgot to say it was wrong. Or write it. And then solving for y, what's your setup? Yes. Okay. Yeah, I like that you just got 72. There's a faster way to get to that. Because it's still a parallelogram where these are consecutive angles, right? Consecutive angles of any parallelogram make it are supplementary. So yes, the 7y minus 7 or minus 5 is equal to 72. You are correct, which means y is 11. So things to just remember when we're going through and solving this, a rhombus has its special characteristics, but it also has all of the characteristics of a parallelogram. So the diagonals bisect each other, the angles are supplementary, opposite sides are parallel. I feel like I'm missing, opposite sides are congruent because all the sides are congruent for a rhombus. I feel like I missed one, but all of those properties. So down to the bottom part. A little arrow got erased or is missing. I have no idea. This 5y plus 5 is for this angle here. Just that small angle. So we're told we have a square. It says it in there. Square LMNP. Things that are true about the square.
5y plus 5 will equal 45.
How do you know it has to be 45? Good. Rhombus means those diagonals bisect each other. The rectangle property, which the square also has, means that each angle is 90 degrees. So that means your 5y plus 5 equals 45. And then solving for x, that one's pretty straightforward. Y'all go ahead and solve both of those. Get both answers. Good? All right. Let's go to a graph chart. So we have this graph. Determine whether that parallelogram is a rhombus, rectangle, or square. Where you're going to be careful. Y'all have your quiz. You have a quiz on Tuesday. When it comes to the quiz or I'm asking you to label, you have to be as specific as possible. So just because like it has a rectangle property, if it's actually a square, you need to tell me it's a square, not a rectangle. So you're just getting as specific as possible. So what I want you to do, whatever way you think, I want you to try and prove what type of shape that is. What kind of figure? So I'll let you all do it first before we talk about it. Because there's lots of different options you have here. And I want to see what y'all pick. When it comes to proving that you have a square, you could do all distance. All the distance formula. What you would have to do is find the distance of all sides and diagonals. So that would be, what, 6 different times of doing the distance formula? Which, not terrible. If the numbers were nicer, it'd be okay. You could use all slope formula. What would you have to find the slopes of to prove it's specifically a square? The sides, because the sides prove that they're 90 degrees, and then the diagonals prove that you have a perpendicular diagonal, which is what goes with a rhombus. So all sides and diagonals. Or you could do a combination of both. So combination of your distance formula and slope.
Wait, with number 2, which one of those has to go with rectangle?
Say that again?
For number 2, which one of the two has to do with rectangle?
The sides go with rectangles, and the diagonals go with a rhombus.
But not all sides are rectangle.
But you're finding slope,
Oh,
right? Slope just means 90 degrees. Because when you're finding the distance of all your sides, that goes with a rhombus. Distance of your diagonals, that goes with a rectangle. So what you're doing is really just like from that tree that we had, where the rectangle part and the rhombus part, just pick one from each of those, and that will combine to get you to prove that it's a square opposed to just some other kind of quadrilateral. Okay, we got 2 more. We're going to go through the rhombus. It says rhombus ABCD. Find all the missing measures. Every single angle within this rhombus we're finding a measure for. What's something we can label? BC. What?
BCD.
So this full one?
Yeah.
What would that be? Yep. 100, which makes this one also 50. What else?
the opposite angle.
CAD is also 50, and this one is 50, and that makes this 100. So correct, the others have to be 40, 40, 80, 40, 40, 80, because of our congruent or supplement rules and all that stuff. We're still missing some angles. What are we? Rhombus, all of these are 90. And if we label one of those as 90, that means all the other three are 90. Okay. On the last one, I want y'all to answer it, and then I'll come check it. If you're right, then you are free to work on your practice problems. It says on your paper to solve for y. I want you to solve for x and y. So solve for x and y.